So good morning, this is Gina Yeske,
And I'm Emily Wilton.
and we are excited this morning to be able to share with you a bit about Advent and especially about our breakthrough resource, Songs of the Season. So we're going to start this morning with a prayer. The prayer can be found in week 3 of the worship resources from Songs of the Season, and it's the unison prayer. Gracious God, we have come to celebrate our hope and faith in you. When the world looks for hope for the future, we look to you. When we find ourselves in the toils of life, feeling weak and lost, we find safety and strength in you. May we live to love as you have. May we give ourselves the resources that you have so freely given to us through your Son, Jesus Christ, this season. And through us, may your love be the light to all those in darkness. Amen.
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 So we are just really excited to begin this morning. We're going to talk specifically about breakthrough. Emily is going to do most of that. And I'm just going to begin with some general things about Advent itself. So we often talk about Advent being a time of waiting, but unlike just patiently standing by and waiting, I believe that Advent is a time of active waiting. We see activity happening in the scriptures throughout the Advent time, preparing for Jesus. And so I thought maybe what I do is compile some of my favorite Advent activities, specifically looking at small groups, and list them all for you this morning. So I feel like Advent, and there's a couple opportunities for small groups that really lend themselves time of the year that people feel like they're good times for churches to start a small group. In September, for the beginning of school year, is a good time. Advent and then Lent is an excellent time. So I would have you consider trying 4 weeks of an Advent lesson. Do 3 weeks before Christmas and then wrap up with a celebration after Christmas. You could do your celebration the week between Christmas and New Year's. For some congregations, that works out very well. And for others, doing it the week after New Year's as an Epiphany kind of celebration is a good, better alternative. People who have children, their kids are off from school, they might be traveling. So it all depends on the dynamic of your congregation. If you have more seniors in your congregation, they might look forward to a party or a celebration between Christmas and New Year's. Invite people to take part in a small group. Share with them that even though this is a very busy season, that this might be a good time to just prepare yourself for Christmas. And also it's a place where you can pray, you can reflect, and you can focus on the reason for the season. I know that there have been times in my life that I got to Christmas Eve and it had been so busy and I was just sitting in worship and I was like, I don't know if I might have my tree ready, I might have my food ready, but I don't know if I have my heart ready. And so I think that this is a good way for you to share with your people. This is a heart preparation piece. So just like they would definitely go to the grocery store before Christmas, this is a good way for them to prepare their heart. During Christmas, as Advent season, I specifically like to have studies that don't require a lot of reading to them. Because people are busy, and so make whatever you're going to do to be self-contained so people don't have to worry about not catching up on the reading. If you do choose a book that has reading, make sure that it has a DVD component to it so that they can, most of those DVDs capture everything that is necessary to know to go through the rest of the lesson. So if it is a book, make sure it has a DVD. And then make sure that your facilitators or yourself share with people. It's okay if they don't read. Just come to be a part of the conversation anyway. Giving people permission to come even though they might not feel like they're prepared. Make sure that people are there to be able to get the most important part of the lessons there. It might be also a good time for you to think about including a meal with your study. So many churches have been successful in doing soup lunches or soup dinners and accompany them with their Advent study. So something church-wide, and people can break up afterwards. Have something for children if you have children in your congregation so that they can do something while the rest of the family does the small group study. Also, it is a good time to think about an online or a Zoom daytime study. So there's a few people who what they do at Advent is they take the breakthrough study or take a small group study that's pretty simple. Everybody can download a copy of it in advance. And they do it from 12 to 1 in the afternoon. It's a Zoom call, so people can just call right from their desk and eat their lunch and have conversation. But I did a couple online Bible studies when I was serving the local church. And what I found was really helpful was to accompany it with a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, sort of like what we have for Breakthrough that Emily has been really making sure there's lots of tips on that and keeping that up to date. But that way people can have conversation throughout the week as well as the Zoom conversation. Advent is a great time to either begin a new tradition or to share old traditions at your church. So this could be interfaced with small groups. So what does it look like if you launch small groups with a church-wide Advent party? Maybe you could make Christmas wreaths. Maybe you could make gingerbread houses, chrismons, whatever might suit your congregation itself, and invite everyone to come, have some snacks, have a craft, and then as you're doing the craft, take time to go over some of the questions. It's far less intimidating for people who are not used to being in small groups to have this casual kind of setting for conversation. And it also, it helps that if you're a shyer person to have something to do so that you don't feel like everyone is staring at you. Remember that kids can be part of small groups too. So you might say to me, well, what's the difference between Sunday school and small groups? Well, first of all, if you don't have children's Sunday school, this is an opportunity to launch one or two things for kids in your community. And maybe if you don't have families, maybe you have people who have grandchildren or neighbors that they would invite to an activity. But if you do have Sunday school, what does it look like to suspend 2 or 3 weeks of Sunday school, invite the community kids to small groups with a purpose to them? So again, have some kind of activity that they're going to do, and then follow up with some mission opportunities. Families really value that their kids are learning about giving, especially generosity at Christmas time. And so what does it look like to have some special activity where kids write cards for the people that do things in their lives, like teachers, school nurses, janitors at the school, the people, their mailmen, whatever they decide. Um, I know that we did a couple years random acts of kindness. And so every kid went home every week with a random act of kindness that they were going to do during that week. And the other idea that I liked when you want to think about inviting families into your space when maybe you don't have a lot of them is an activity called Crowd at the Crash. So what does it look like for every family to bring something from their home that represents them and have them put it near your manger so that they are, coming to adore the Jesus the King, so that they have the same place as shepherds and the Magi. So there were a few ideas I had about different activities that you could do. I this year for G&J, we have tied together the small group and the preaching resource with our 40 days of prayer. So the 40 days of prayer use the same scripture. Every Sunday, if you're signed up for it, you'll receive a devotion, and then you'll receive 6 days of daily reading that goes along with it. So it's a way of doing a daily devotion and offering it to your congregation that ties in with your sermon series. You as a pastor can just send them out yourself. You can just forward it to your mailing list if that's the easiest, or you can invite your congregation to sign up and receive them on their own. So what we're gonna Emily's gonna move on to sharing a little bit about breakthrough, and then we're gonna invite you to think about how do you gather in your church? What are some special things that you do in your congregation that maybe would be good in another congregation? So Emily, I'm turning this over to you.
Great, thanks, Gina. So many of you hopefully have seen the Songs of the Season Breakthrough resource. It's on the Breakthrough website. And the reason we went with Songs of the Season to sort of organize this series is because it really ties back to our United Methodist heritage. So it's good for congregations who maybe do sing the traditional songs. It's a familiar theme. It's a familiar music that's common for the season. But for congregations who also don't sing this music, they don't have to all of a sudden turn traditional for Advent. It's more of a way of tying into who we have been as Methodists, regardless of whether the songs are actually sung. So each week is organized around a traditional Christmas hymn. The weeks are also organized around the themes of the Advent wreath. So now I might get this order wrong, but let me see. I believe it's hope, peace, joy, and love. Thanks. So the songs that we've chosen tie in with those themes of Advent as well. So I'll just do a brief overview of what the topics are for each week. We do have the 4 weeks of Advent, and then Christmas Eve or Christmas Day itself, and then the week after Christmas. So it's a 6-week series. And I won't go into too much detail because you can just read it yourself, and I don't want to read to you too much. But the first week we talk about hope. So the title is Born to Deliver, and it's remembering what our Christmas hope is all about, a Savior that paves the way for us to go out into the world. Week 2 is called The Path of Peace. And it's talking about how Christian peace is different from the world's way of sort of jumping to revenge as a first response to wrongdoing. Week 3 is Rejoice, so it's on the theme of joy, the joy of freedom for everyone that Jesus comes to deliver, and also how we participate in working for that freedom. So you'll see each week it's not just about what God does for us, but what that also calls us to do in the world in response. Week 4 is Lift Up Your Head. Lift Up Your Heads. So the theme is love, and it talks about how Jesus' birth eventually leads to the cross, which is sort of the ultimate act of God's love for us. Week 5, so this will be for Christmas Eve or day, is the light of the world, and that's when we light the Christ candle in the Advent wreath, if that's something your church does. Talking about Jesus as the light of the world, and ourselves being called to be the light of the world in our own time and place. Week 6 is Go Tell It. There's no new candle, but it's discussing how Jesus has prepared the way for us and now tells us to go tell everyone the good news. So we chose, part of the reason we chose to go this route is because it works for churches, both churches who are used to doing sermon series, but also churches who follow the liturgical year. It doesn't line up perfectly with the lectionary, but it ties in the Advent themes that are so important for some more traditional churches. There are a couple of new features I wanted to highlight. So we have Advent wreath readings. That's new, and it also would be a good idea to invite people in your church to light their own Advent wreath at home. So it's a practice that isn't happening just on Sunday morning, but also throughout the week, as sort of a family way of focusing on what the season is about. The second new feature is that this is our first series that incorporates both traditional and contemporary songs in English, but also songs from the Spanish and Korean and African American heritage hymnals every week. So really drawing on the Church Universal and our oneness in Christ, as well as reflecting the diversity of GNJ. So I just wanted to let you know there are some corrections to the resources that will be made in the next couple of days. Some weeks got a little bit mixed up, so if you're reading along or looking along, those will be corrected shortly. I do have a few ideas myself for how to make this Advent not just about the church family, but about the community and connecting people to those outside the church. But I'd like to ask you first if you have any Advent practices or events or ways of celebrating Advent that you like to do or are planning to do this year that you might be able to share with the group. I'll make sure everyone's unmuted first. Okay. So I see Kelly, Marlene, and then I'm not sure who our third person is. We don't have a name here.
Ronell.
Hi. Welcome. So does anyone have any traditions that they like to celebrate at Advent?
Not really. I'm in church.
Could be like a carol sing or live nativity. I don't know if anyone does those anymore.
The church I was at prior to my new appointment did a live nativity the weekend before Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Christmas Eve. So it was a nice start to the Christmas Eve service. People could come and see a live nativity right out front and then proceed into the Christmas Eve service.
Oh, that's lovely. And did you find that that drew some community members as well who maybe wouldn't normally attend the church?
It did draw a few new members. We did have quite a bit of neighborhood people that would stop in each evening that we did it.
Mm-hmm.
They would tell their friends about it. They would come back. They would bring their kids to see it. And we thought it was a great way to connect with those that don't normally come out to a church at all.
Yeah,
They were able to get the message of the season that way.
that's great. Yeah, I think just including animals is and things like that is such a great way to get people interested and just curious, like what's going on there at that church.
Yeah.
At Christ United Methodist Church here in Piscataway, 1 week out of the Advent season, we have a cantata for both services, and that really draws in a lot of people because we also have bring in an orchestra and the whole thing, and so a lot of people come and members invite friends and family, and so those are usually pretty big services.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I will share a couple of the ideas I had. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or thoughts.
Emily, can I just share one thing that
Please do.
I have? We, from an African American background, we do things a little differently. But I remember last year I was part of this congregation that for Advent, and this was in Trenton, where I was part of the Maker's Place, where we collecting diapers.
Mm-hmm.
For babies. And that, one of the things, it was an idea that I had to have a manger. At least the church had one, and they weren't going to use it. And I said, we've got to find some use for that. So I said, I need the manger. So we put the manger on the altar, right behind the rail. And we were able to find a little doll that was really kind of raggedy, and we put that there. So the whole concept of it was that here's the Christ child in the manger, and we were bringing diapers for this baby who probably would not have any. And so for that period of time, the entire altar was just covered with hundreds and hundreds of diapers. So that's my first experience in doing something like that. We don't have cantatas and concerts and stuff like that, but I'm looking forward, and that's why I am so glued to every word you're saying, to get some ideas this time, because I have 2 congregations which I pastor, and really need to come up with something, what they are used to doing and what is this new pastor bringing. So that's my goal this year, to come up with some ideas, and you and Gina have given some really great ideas already.
Great. And I think that whole idea of the manger with the diapers is so poignant, because I think people they get caught up in this romantic idea of what Jesus' birth was like, and having just having diapers there really brings it home. Like, this is a baby just like any other baby, so fragile and new and in need and poor too. So that's beautiful. Thank you. I'm curious, Marlene, do you know what the Advent traditions may have been in the churches before you became the pastor there?
Yes. No, I was a member at that church, and basically the tradition was just lighting the candles.
Mhm.
I think there was a Christmas, one year there was a Christmas Eve service, but there was not a lot done.
Okay.
Okay, and now where I am, I have moved into a very different place, and they are very used to, they're very traditional. Both churches are very traditional, and they have done some things, and I need to sit and find out what they have done in the past and what I can bring
Mhm.
to support that or add to that or make it, creative.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I think some of what we can do to bring new life is to draw on what is already there and
Yes.
what's been focused inside and kind of turn it out. So,
Yes.
if there's typically a cookie exchange or something like that within the church,
Mm.
maybe instead of doing it within the church, pairing up with another church in the community and making it an exchange between the two churches that has some singing, carol singing, hymns, whatever, along with it. That's a story I heard that a church did, and I think it went really well. Trying to just find where I am in my notes here. Pardon me for a second. Okay, so another idea would be to call your local either school or fire hall or police station and ask what they need, and just be there to do what they ask. Of course, there's limits on what we can do, but one thing might be to suggest some practical ways that your church might be able to serve them so that they realize that they can ask for something outside of what they think the church usually does.
Okay.
And just showing that that the church is there to love and serve the community unconditionally, not only if it brings more people into the church. So, for example, Lan, the director of worship, shared with me that he has been in churches that have done this in the past, and schools have often needed help just with lamination, so cutting out laminated papers and figures and things like that. And so someone from the church will go in and grab a pile of laminated things, and then everyone gets together and cuts them out, and that's just a very practical, basic way of helping.
Wonderful.
One of the churches that I served, what they did on Christmas Eve was that they brought a supper to the police department and to the fire department. They're going to be working on Christmas Eve.
I like that idea too.
I like that.
So we're thinking of things that we can do as a community, but it's also important, I think, to inspire people in the congregation to go out and do things just in their daily lives, so that it's not just a Sunday morning or just a church thing, but really becomes a part of their life. So some ideas of things that you could encourage congregants or parishioners to do would be, maybe if they know someone whose life is extra crazy at the holidays, they could offer to go grocery shopping for them, or take them a meal and make sure it's something that they can eat and that they will eat. It could be running an errand for someone. It could be inviting someone who is lonely over for dinner, or going to them if they're not mobile.
Yeah. Not
necessarily just on Christmas Day, but through Advent and maybe beyond Advent as well. With the theme of peace, we can perhaps encourage people to think about how to create peace in their own lives that will shine out to others. So perhaps that's reaching out to someone you've had a disagreement with and seeking some reconciliation. Or if people aren't at that point yet, it could mean doing some internal work and letting go of resentment before taking that step. Looking at the theme of joy, we can encourage people to think of doing something unexpected yet fun for people. So I was also thinking of what Gina mentioned, bringing breakfast to teachers at a local school, or even the random acts of kindness, which don't have to just be for kids, right? So
Yeah.
surprising a stranger by paying for their coffee at a coffee shop, something like that. And then with the theme of love, I think oftentimes, and I don't want to say we shouldn't do all sorts of charity at Christmas, because we definitely should, but a lot of times charities receive a lot at Christmas and then are lacking later in the year because people have forgotten. They're not in that Christmas spirit anymore. So maybe Advent can also be a time of making commitments to be a Christmas people throughout the year. Making commitments, looking at times of year when food banks are running low and saying, okay, we're going to take this Christmas spirit and we're going to keep it moving throughout the year. So those are just a couple of ideas I had. Oh, if that sparks any further thoughts or ideas from you.
We're mentioning about the people who are lonely. It made me think about if when you do the Advent wreath, we often invite families to be part of lighting Advent candles. What does it look like if you ask each family to invite a single senior that might be in your congregation to come up with them, be a part of that lighting, to join their family, and then the family can kind of adopt them, and maybe build relationships that'll last a lot longer than just Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think another thing is Christmas tends to be so much about family, which is great, but there are also a lot of single folks in our churches who sometimes might feel like things are always directed towards family. So making sure that they're included and feel appreciated within our services, I think that's important too.
And lots of churches do something, they call them Blue Christmases, Christmas of, following sometimes of grief. I know the Network Grief Share has a lot of resources for churches to use if you have persons who are newly widowed, widowers, lost someone in their family. And it doesn't just have to be death. Divorce is a very difficult thing during these holidays. So how are you making space for people to who are not feeling rejoicing in this moment, and making that they have an opportunity to be prayed for and to pray? And then it's a great time for evangelism. So what does it look like if in the beginning of Advent you invite your congregation to write down the name of someone and just to hold it and to pray for that person during the Christmas season, and then possibly invite them to worship with them, invite them to a Christmas activity, and then continue to pray for them throughout the year. So it's an opportunity for some individual evangelism instead of what we think about as far as bigger rallies or events that would take place. I think that in the midst of all of this, to make sure that people know what's going on at your church. So I think we have fabulous things that happen in our churches, but we don't give people enough time to plan them on their calendar. So on the first Sunday of Advent, I would really say by Thanksgiving. So if you have a Thanksgiving worship service, by Thanksgiving, you should have a printed list that has everything that happens in your church during the holiday season, from your Thanksgiving worship and food drives or whatever happens for Thanksgiving, all the way through to Epiphany.
Mm.
And make sure that everything is listed out. Times are there, contact numbers are there, and that it's very easy for people to see. And have all of that information easily posted on your website, as well as have it on your Facebook. For contact, you might have to have your church number for privacy's sake on the website and on the Facebook, but otherwise, make sure that it's very clear. If there's cost involved with anything, that people know the cost, so they know the expectation. And sometimes we need to say free if it's free, because people won't come to a gingerbread making thing if they're concerned that it's going to cost something once they get there. If children are, make sure that you're saying children are welcome, etc., so that people in concerts and stuff are not concerned. If there's a child care available, make sure you put that down.
Mm.
I like those ideas.
I think that's it from me. Were there any questions from anybody?
Could you talk a little bit, I'm sorry, what's that? Merlene, can you talk a little bit more about, I've heard about the Blue Christmas, and Gina just mentioned Grief Share.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to do something around that, because there's a lot of, I have an aging congregation, so there are a lot of widows. And we also, yesterday I had Bible studies, and everyone in there was a lot of grief, and especially with their adult children being cut off from their adult children. And I'm telling you, they have lost their spouse, the adult children, they're cut off from them, and they are grieving. And I know within that space, we make space for them to express themselves, but I'd like to extend that to the congregation, because I know there's so many more who are grieving in so many ways. And I've never done a Blue Christmas service, and any information on that or help, I would really appreciate that.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. I was an intern at a church that does a Blue Christmas service every year. I did one last year while I was there. And basically it was I believe it was a Sunday evening service. Of course, you could do it whenever you want.
Okay.
But it was very quiet. There was contemplative music. And there was sort of you don't have to do it exactly this way. But there was alternating between sort of readings. Some was scripture and some was dramatic reading, some was poetry that sort of captured that grief, and alternating those readings with music. Mm-hmm. And it was music that didn't focus on, the joy of the season and all that. We did some secular music. We did some, actually it was mostly secular, because we were trying to make the service something that would be appealing to everybody, so that they didn't feel like they could only come if they were Christians. Now that worked for that particular church. You might want to do something more targeted towards, your own folks. But we alternated, and I believe there was a time during the service where we could come up to the front and light a candle in memory of people who had passed. and we gave a time for sharing about those people, just a brief, I'm lighting this in memory of so-and-so.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else. And then, we ended the service with songs and readings that pointed in the direction of hope without being too quick to jump to that.
Right.
Without saying, okay, now it's Christmas, feel better. But just allowing for that hope to be sort of a glimmer. So that's the way they did it. Gina,
that sounds good.
Yeah, thanks. Gina, any insight on that?
We had it that we actually, it's very similar. Doing it during the day seemed to meet the needs of a lot of seniors. So sometimes we did 2 times, one during the day and one on a Sunday night. 2 times what we did was we had people write on strips of cloth their name or the thing that was breaking their heart. And then for Christmas, we took and put them in the manger.
Oh.
Clothes for the manger piece. So that was a way to connect in that way. So the other thing was that we created a small group. So even though so we did the service, but what does it look like to create a small group? So we said specifically, I just pulled the grief share information from the website for Christmas, and we just met 3 times before Christmas and had the small group, and it was well attended. For us, we were lucky. Down the street was like a local pizza place, and so after we were done small group, anybody who wanted, we went down and had a slice of pizza together. But that seemed to meet a need pretty well by doing that.
Okay.
There is also for, a church that was maybe a little bigger that has more younger people. There's a service for those who are childless. So this is a hard season when everything, around children, and if you've been unable to have children or if you have recently lost a child. I know that there are services around that, and if anyone was interested, I can get you those resources.
I would very much like those resources, Gina.
Okay.
Yeah, I really would. So let me go back and ask you, Gina, about, I like the idea about writing the name on a piece of cloth and then putting it in a manger. Was this a small strip or was that something big, or you just laid it next to the baby, or?
What I actually did was we took white, I guess it was a white sheet,
Okay.
Stuff all over your church, and it was like a white sheet, and we just ripped it apart into strips, and we actually left it there all season. So even people who didn't go to the service,
Okay.
The manger sat there empty, and they could do it. They put the strip into the manger, and then we actually they had very traditional, they had this doll, I think this doll was like 50 years old. And they had this doll that went in that manger for Christmas Eve. And so we just took him and actually wrapped the strips around the baby.
Oh, I like that.
So it was, but it was all of their brokenness was just handed over to Christ. So even if you didn't have a doll there, it being in the manger, I think would be.
Yeah, like that very much. I am taking tons of notes, but when will the recording be available?
I will have it to Emily probably by tomorrow morning, and then she'll make sure that it's posted, right?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Marlene, are you in the Facebook group?
No, that's my other question. I didn't know about that, and definitely wants to be on that. How do I?
If you search Breakthrough or Breakthrough GNJ,
okay.
ask to be become a member, or I think you can just probably just join. Gina, I'm still not an admit on that. But I can also I can search you and add you as a friend and then invite you as well.
That would be great.
What can I get your last name or what you're listed as on Facebook?
Taylor, Merlene.
Okay.
Taylor.
Okay.
Merlene Taylor.
Okay, great. Marlene, I think I met you at Maker's Place at a diaper drive.
You do have a familiar face. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
All right.
Facebook.
Well, we are so grateful that you gave us this time this morning. Please know that if you have any small group questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and that Emily is our breakthrough resource person. She's the guru of all breakthrough, so she would love to also connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good to know, because I am starting the Stop Being Nice Breakthrough series this Sunday.
Oh, great.
And probably I would like to connect with you. And I did the Breakthrough, the road trip, and I had so much fun with that.
Oh, great.
I think I can do the Stop Being Nice. It's appealing to me, but I thought I needed a little bit more flesh to put on the bones. And any ideas? So I'd love to connect with you.
Great. I will look you up, and
Okay.
I'll send you an email, and maybe we can set up a time to talk about it.
That would be awesome. Awesome. Thank you. You have given me a lot of great information this morning, because when I get off this phone, get off with you, I'm going to a clergy meeting. It's my first time there with all the clergy in the area. And some of these things that you mentioned, it just triggers some things that I can ask, or people I can look up or find out about this, especially reaching out to the police and the fire departments and, what people have been doing. So it's just perfect timing for me. So I thank you both.
And Renee and Kelly, is there anything we can do for you before we get off?
No, I would just like to thank you for doing this. It does give us an opportunity to get some ideas from other members around the conference. So I do appreciate it.
Me too. I'm good.
Okay.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. Gina, did you have a closing prayer, or would you like me to close us out?
Why don't you close us?
Okay. Let's pray. Heavenly God, thank you for this time of sharing that we have had. Thank you for a season where we get to prepare and wait for the most miraculous gift that you have given us in your Son, Jesus Christ. I pray that you will be with each of us as we go into this day and this season. Give us your Holy Spirit that we might do your work in the world, and that we might make connections with people in our congregations and people outside of our congregation, to share with them the love that you have given us and the love that we want to give them too. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 All right. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Okay, you too.
Okay,
Thank you, ladies. Have a good day.
okay, bye-bye.
Bye.